Well, welcome all of you. I'm April Stensgaard, Director of Career Development. Our team is thrilled to have you here in person, and we have a few guests with us today. We'd like to introduce to you. Before we get started, please just take a moment and pray with me. Father, we're so grateful for who you are. Thank you for this day. Thank you for the plans and the purposes that you have for each of our lives. And I ask that part of hearing you at work in the lives of those that we'll hear from today, God, I ask that you would encourage our spirit, give us new insights, and Father, that you would give us the ability to hear your voice and to know how we can also be encouraged to make an impact for your kingdom. Thank you for this morning, and we just give you the glory ahead of time, Lord Jesus. Amen. Well, we have a few guests today. I want to go ahead and introduce them to you. First of all, Caleb Hanson is a finance member of Republic Services, and he is an alumni with us. And he will be sharing a little bit about his story and how God has just helped him share his faith and live out his faith at work, whether that be challenging or a little easy to navigate at times. And we're just praying that will encourage you and give you just some insights. And then after that, I'll introduce to you Dustin Stoltz, who will also be sharing with us. He's an alumni of Northwestern, serves at finance with Optum. We had another gal who's an alumni of Northwestern who unfortunately yesterday was in a car accident. So please keep Christine in your prayers. And she will be doing a segment on Zoom with Sarah that we'll send you as well afterwards. So again, welcome. Percolate on your questions because we will have a question and answer time after we do our interviews. So I will just lead us out. And first, Caleb, I'd love for you, if you don't mind, to share with the students about the first job in your field that you had after graduation.
Sure. So I graduated May of 2011 from Northwestern here with an accounting degree. And my first role was with KPMG in Minneapolis. So I was an audit associate with them. And they actually came on campus here and did interviews. I guess it would have been probably February or so of 2011. And so they hired me for an October start. So after I graduated, I had that lined up. So I did that for about a year. Kind of found out it wasn't really what I wanted to do long term, just kind of seeing what some of the seniors ahead of me were dealing with and their workload. It just didn't really appeal to me. So from there, I went to Target, corporate headquarters downtown here. Worked in internal audit there for about 3 years. And from there, I was laid off as part of the big corporate downsizing they did in 2015. That was after their failed expansion into Canada. They had to find some way to cut costs. And so everybody at my level, senior auditors in my department were cut. And so I wasn't really looking to leave Target or do something different, but that that decision was made for me. And that's ultimately how I ended up here at Republic Services, where I've been the last 5.5 years.
So Caleb, can you share with us what you enjoy most or find interesting about your role and or the most challenging part of your role?
So I'd say the thing I like the most, so Republic Services, a little background. So we're the second largest waste management company in the country. So Waste Management is the biggest. You probably heard of them, the green trucks, green cans, right? So we're the second largest in the country behind them. And the way that they're kind of broken out is each area of the country is kind of broken out. So the Midwest area, including Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, is kind of the Midwest area. And then within the Midwest, they break it down into business units. So the Minneapolis market is its own business unit. And so I'm the finance manager for that business unit. So I oversee anything related to accounting and finance for our market. We do about $90 million a year in revenue. So I oversee that department. I have a staff of 5 currently under me. And so the thing I enjoy most about the role, I would say, is I really get to impact the business on a day-to-day basis. So pretty much any decision that has to be made, anything that we're looking into as far as an initiative or decisions that have to be made, I'm at the table with the leadership team and just providing the insight from a finance perspective. And that's something that, in my previous role at Target, you're at a 10,000 foot view at such a large company. And so being that close to, the day-to-day operations and making decisions has been probably the most rewarding and enjoyable part of my role.
Would love to hear about any mentors you had or people who may have opened doors for you in your career.
Yeah, I think so. The previous general manager that we had at Republic Services, he started in role probably 3 years ago, and for whatever reason, he saw something in me that I almost didn't see in myself, and he really was just an advocate for me, and he would push me to do things that were maybe outside my comfort zone or would bring me into things that I hadn't been exposed to before. And I just feel like, his investment of time in me and just believing in what he saw in me was just, really helped me in my career and gave me confidence to continue to grow and just take on things I maybe otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. So I'd say, he was definitely the person who's impacted my career the most. And, to this day, he's somebody I can go to with questions, or I know he's always kind of got my back. And so really that's inspired me to, try and do the same for others and look for the potential in other people that maybe they don't see, or, just give them opportunities they might otherwise not have, just because I've experienced that and it meant a lot to me. So I'd say that my biggest mentor for sure was, his name's Brandon. So he was our previous general manager, and I just really appreciate the investment that he, showed in me, and it's really been a benefit to me.
I love how in our lives, in our careers, we often will look back and see how God has placed people in our lives to give us confidence or open doors, guide and direct us. And I'm going to do a little highlight here. Even though you are still a student, it is critical to find mentors in your field. We have a lot of alumni who'd love to connect with you, expose you to different fields, different aspects of their field, and maybe job shadow, or maybe look at hearing more of their stories and how they can help listen to your story and maybe guide and direct you a little bit as well. So it's just really important to connect with other professionals in the field, which is why we love, having our alumni involved. Can you share for us a little bit of a specific example of how you've seen God in your industry or working through you within your work in any capacity?
Yeah, I think I'd say, looking back over the 10 years or so I've been in my career, sometimes in the moment, it's hard to understand why certain things happen. I think looking back when I got laid off from Target, that was the biggest thing that just didn't make sense to me at the time. And I said, well, why? I was happy here. I had recently been promoted and really was looking long-term to, grow and develop there. And now looking back 5 years down the road, I'm in a different industry, completely different from Target, right? A very different role. And honestly, it's been the best change that I never would have made otherwise. And so I think sometimes those moments where you think this doesn't make any sense and I wouldn't have picked this, it's really God working behind the scenes, because he's got something much better that, you might not know until years down the road. And that's definitely been the case for me. Is at first I was like, I really don't like this. I wish I was back with my old team. I wish all these different things. But as time went on, I realized, this really was the right thing for me and my family and my career and everything. So I think that's one area where God was working. It didn't feel like it at the time, but now that I kind of look back on it, it just makes a little more sense. So that's really, given me some perspective that even as things come up day to day that don't make a lot of sense, that just, you got to trust to keep doing what you can do, and just rely on God to give you the strength to take each day as it comes. And, he's working on something a lot of times that's bigger than what we can see.
Thanks, Caleb. I'd also like to tie into that to ask how your faith has been challenged or strengthened by your career.
Yeah, I think kind of what I just said, the things that you don't necessarily understand in the moment can kind of help, strengthen you. And I just think some of the relationships that I've been able to build and just conversations I've had with people, even at Target, I remember, Target is a very progressive company, and they have very strong beliefs on certain issues that maybe are at odds sometimes with what Christians believe. And so there were many times that I was put in positions where it's like, wow, I really feel kind of like the odd one out, where I'm not, as loud vocal supporting some of these things that, it's kind of the norm. They want everybody to kind of follow that same path. But it really challenged me in that, I don't necessarily have to agree or endorse everything that my workplace is pushing, but I can still have respect and relationships with those that I work with, and just show them that, hey, even though I might not agree with you, it doesn't mean I don't respect you as a person and treat you just the same as anybody else. And I think it just really showed me in the real world, you get outside of the Northwestern circle where, you kind of feel safe and you can share your thoughts and beliefs pretty openly. But, in the workplace, you kind of do have to look at it with a little different lens. And, it really comes down to just loving people the way that Jesus would, right? Is look at people as just a human that's loved by God and treat them that way. And even if you don't necessarily agree, hopefully you can show God's love to them just in the way that you interact on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's just been something eye-opening as I've been in the career versus when I was, in school and at Northwestern.
Very encouraging, especially that approach for the times that we're in now as well. In your current work environment, how are people of faith perceived? And maybe that's a little clear, maybe it's not as clear.
Yeah, I think in my current company, I don't feel, I feel like people of faith are pretty respected. There's a lot. The industry I'm in is pretty open to people of faith. I don't really ever feel like I've been looked at strangely. When I was at Target, it definitely felt like I was a little bit of an outsider for sure. And I think the assumption is, well, you're a Christian, so you're closed-minded and you're judgmental. And so really my goal was to just show love to other people and show that, I'm not here to judge you. I'm just here to work with you and treat you like somebody that I respect and, with the love of Christ and not, try and act like I'm superior or I'm better than you. But I think I definitely did feel a little bit like the outsider a lot of times at Target, just with the culture that really permeated there. But I mean, fortunately, the company I'm in now really doesn't have that same feel. So I've been pretty, just blessed to have that experience. It's a little different, but I've definitely seen both sides of it where you feel like, okay, I'm accepted here versus, well, I'm a little bit of an outsider. So.
What advice would you give to students starting out in this type of career?
I think the biggest thing, if you're starting out in accounting or finance, anything business really, is just be open to learn. I think, leaving Northwestern, I thought, well, I've got my degree, I'm ready to go. And it's amazing how much you don't know when you get to your first day at work and you go, oh, wow, I wasn't, I didn't know what was going to happen and I'm not as prepared as I thought I was. You've got a good foundation, but some of that, day to day, and each company's a little different. So you've got to just be open to learn and just soak it all in as much as you can. And I think the biggest thing is find somebody that you can reach out to, kind of like we mentioned, a mentor or somebody that you see within your company, your organization that, well, that person really has things figured out and I want to just learn from them. And I think a lot of times people are very willing to speak to you and work with you if you're interested in them and you see something that, hey, I really want to learn from you. People are usually pretty open to, to help and guide and direct you. So just find somebody that, you can work with and look up to and just soak in as much as you can. Because the more you learn and the quicker you're willing to just, take in what you can, the sooner you're going to be successful in your career.
In light of that, one thing that we hear from employers all the time is you can teach an employee skills and you can train them, but initiative and passion, you cannot teach. So just like you mentioned, Caleb, taking that initiative to seek out mentors and others that you can learn from and that passion for what you do, it's very noticeable. It might seem like, oh, who would notice that? You would stand out as an employee.
100%.
Right? Like,
Yep.
I don't know if you have other thoughts on that.
Yep. I mean, I can just tell you, I've got employees that I work with every day, and those that are willing to go the extra mile, willing to learn. If you raise your hand and say, hey, I've got time, I'd love to help with this, that is a differentiator all day. I mean, you'd be surprised how many people just don't, or they think, well, my boss will reach out to me if they want me to do this. But if you're willing to raise your hand and just, hey, happy to help where I can, you're going to stand out more than you think.
So Caleb, thank you so much for this time. We will circle back to a Q&A, so make a mental note of questions that you have for Caleb. So we'll just do a quick switch for now, and then we'll bring you both back up. So we have Dustin. Thank you, Caleb. Dustin is the Associate Director of Finance at Optum. And so Dustin, if you want to share a little bit about yourself and how did you find and what was the first job you had in your field after graduation?
Sure, yeah. So I graduated from Northwestern in the spring of 2008. And from graduating from Northwestern, I went to Land O'Lakes, which is just down the road, actually, just a few miles down Snelling there. And it was a total God thing. I could get into it. It's kind of a long story on how I actually got the job. But maybe to summarize it, I didn't follow any of the rules that they say to do to get a job. It was a totally God thing. I actually, during my first interview, I passed a former Northwestern alum who didn't even know I was interviewing, who then pushed for me to get the job. So it was just a totally random interaction. And then there were a few other things too in that story where it was just very obvious that God kind of had his hand in how I got the job. So I started in like a finance accounting rotational type program. Basically what that means is they didn't know what I was going to do when I started, and they just threw a bunch of stuff at me until enough stuff stick to make a job worthwhile, which was great for me just starting out. And you'll find that too when you start in entry-level jobs. They might have like a general outline of what the job will look like, but they're still trying to figure it out too, what you can handle, how much they can throw at you, and then they'll kind of work with you and throw things as you get ready. So that was really cool. And then from there, I think I had one other small job in between, but then I took a job as a plant accountant out in Tulare, California, which is in the middle of nowhere, for Land O'Lakes still. And that was awesome. And maybe I'll get into some of that in future questions, but that really separated me from what other people were willing to do, to go into a desert cow country where you're like 3 hours from anything cool, basically. So it was a really great experience. And from there, I progressed and I took a job as a milk sourcing manager. So I stepped out of finance accounting, went into like a supply chain role where I actually sold milk to other big processors in the area, which was a lot of fun. I did that for 6 years. But that job was 24/7, 365, phone was always on, and we had our first kid, and it became a little too overwhelming. So from there, I looked around, kind of kept my options open, and actually another alum from Northwestern, a guy that lived right across the hall from me, was working at United Health Group, and I took a job working for him in a finance accounting role in their IT area, which is where I am now and have been for the last 2 years.
I think we're hearing a theme of alumni helping out other alumni and students. And I don't know if you've had a chance to meet Sarah Rain yet, but she's curated a career community for business finance students with a lot of other alumni, their resources. And so it's fun to hear both of you see how others have opened doors and opportunities for you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe to jump on that too. I think when I was at Northwestern, I heard a lot about networking in terms of like go out and talk to people in roles like I'm at, or people that are established in the industry. And that is very important and just as important. But the other thing that I think I didn't realize was the networking you're building right now with your peers and those people that maybe aren't even in a business role. You'll find that the ministry department, people that have history degrees, the communication majors, they all end up kind of flowing into where you're going to be going as well. And just having a big network that's vast and diverse and people your own age as you progress up the chain is really important. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, keeping your network is about genuine relationships. So it doesn't mean just try to make as many connections as you can, but it helps to have a wide net.
Thank you. Could you tell us a little bit about some examples of how you see God working in your industry, in your career?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, with my first job, definitely. And the other thing too is just the people that he's kind of placed along the way. Caleb mentioned it too. There were a couple mentors that played a big part in my development, and for reasons I still don't know why, they took interest in me and were willing to bring me into things that I wasn't ready for or didn't have any business in being in. And then they helped kind of walk me through. And it seemed like a lot of them were Christian men at the time that kind of helped guide me through. And so it just played a huge role. The other thing is especially in my first role, I had a group that I joined, and they, I'm a big fast food guy. I go out to eat a lot, which isn't good. So I'm not advertising for that. But because of that, I would go out to eat with people every day. And it would be the same similar group of guys that would go out. And the stories they would talk about were not stories that I was used to from Northwestern. They were not great things, basically. And so I just kept hanging out with them. I kept going out to eat with them. And then eventually, a couple years in, I proposed and we had a wedding. And so I invited them to my wedding. And it was here at Yeah, it was here. Yeah, I was telling my wife that. But yeah, it was here in Northwestern. And we had a pastor that was very intentional about sharing Jesus and the salvation story to everybody there. And so those guys that had been sitting with me, and I'd been laying little, a trail along the way that I would be going to church and other things, and I didn't drink, and the basic things that were unusual to them, but maybe not super unusual to our community. Then I brought them into my life in a big way at a wedding where they basically had to hear the story, and then from there, we had more discussions after it, and it progressed. And I don't know if they've made any progress, but you just lay the seeds and hopefully pray that something big will happen. So just the people that he's put in my path has been probably a big thing.
I think that's so encouraging to just be reminded for all of us the importance of relationship and journeying with people over time gives the credibility and the trust I'm sure they had in you. So that's great. What a neat way for the Lord to work. How has your faith been challenged or strengthened in your career? And I know that's probably piggybacking a bit on that.
Yeah, for sure. Challenge for sure is time, in that when you're at Northwestern, you don't necessarily have to make time to you should, but you're in classes where you're praying and you're reading and you're pushed to keep learning. Now that I'm out, especially as I've gotten further away from Northwestern, and we have kids and a job that takes up, quite a bit of time, it just requires so much more intentionality for myself to make sure that I'm grounded, that I'm reading, that I'm praying, and that I'm investing, and I'm keeping my relationship with Jesus at the forefront. And that's tough. And it's so easy to, when you put the kids down and you finish up some work late at night, just to throw on ESPN or something and tune out. But it's really about an everyday kind of intentionality that is hard to do, especially when you're outside of like a Northwestern where you're kind of pushed on it when you go to all your classes and chapels and everything.
I think we have another minute here. What advice would you give students starting out in this career?
Yeah, and I would piggyback exactly what Caleb said. It's really just diving into the dirty, grimy, the stuff that nobody wants to do. That stuff all flows down. So the stuff that the higher executives, your bosses don't want to do, it all comes down. And if you're willing to show that you can dive in and you're willing to learn something, even if it isn't something that was a part of your role, just speaks so big. Because if you can master just something small and manual and time consuming, if you prove that if you can do those small things and the details, you'll get more and more responsibility. They'll trust you, that you're willing to put in the work, that you're willing to be detail oriented, and they'll be more than happy to bring up more stuff as bigger responsibilities come. So it's really just about the stuff that people don't really want to do. And that goes back to even like my job move out to California, where there were, I think I was the only applicant for that job. So, it's something that it's the stuff that's not easy, that's uncomfortable, and maybe doesn't even look like there's much of a spotlight on. But like Caleb said, your supervisor and other people around will notice those things.
Thank you so much. And we're going to do a question answer time with both of you. So I'm going to logistically see, Dustin, if you can move your chair this way,
Okay.
6 feet apart. We'll bring Caleb back up on that chair as long as your distance. I think we can accomplish both of you being able to be recorded. And we're going to have about 10-minute time. Question answer. You both may want to answer a particular question. If you students have a question directed either at Caleb or Dustin, you can ask them directly. So, all right, who wants to get us started?
How have you seen like COVID impact your industry, your specific job? How does that kind of change things for you?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing, so I mean, we're in the trash industry, so a lot of our customers have been affected, pretty significantly. So we service Target Field, US Bank Stadium, Mall of America. So those things have been just decimated. Restaurants, I mean, a lot of them have gone out of business. We do a lot of business with independent, owned restaurants. And unfortunately, we've seen just, a huge impact on the business community locally. And so it's been a huge hit to our bottom line. So obviously that's something you can recover from, and we've seen some recovery as the year's gone on. So from a, industry financial perspective, it's really been, how the customers go, that's how we go. As far as my role, I was considered an essential employee, so I was able to continue to work in the office. So that's been nice for me just from a normalcy perspective, but all of my employees were sent remote work. And it's been interesting because at the beginning, everybody was very opposed to it. They didn't want to work from home. And now I don't think I could get them back if I wanted to. They're so happy at home and they don't want to come back. So it's been interesting. I think, certain companies and industries have been more flexible with working from home arrangements, just over time in the past. And I'd say we were one that was very, nope, you got to be here. And so I think, honestly, the landscape will be changed probably forever in the work, environment, that the flexible work from home, work remote is going to be a lot more prevalent because we've had to see that it'll work if needed. So I think that's kind of been my perspective on it.
Yeah, and in the healthcare industry, it's kind of been, there's pluses and minuses that kind of offset each other. So the negatives to like our bottom line would be any optional health care, like working on your knee or some other surgeries that aren't required for life or death are basically been pushed off. So that's negative. The positive though are we have a big insurance arm of United Health Group where people are paying premiums, but they aren't necessarily even being able to use them. So there's kind of offsetting balances. So as a monster healthcare conglomerate, there are enough pluses and minuses that COVID hasn't been too big of an impact. For me, and I was telling Caleb back there in the back, it was a disaster working from home for me because my wife and I both have full-time jobs and we were trying to watch our 2-year-old at the same time for daycare. So it was trying to do 3 things. We kind of were failing at everything basically. So I just went back to the office about a month ago and it's been great.
I think we'll have a couple more questions. If one of you, whoever answers the question first, could repeat it because the microphone here, I don't know, will pick up the questions, but I think, did you have a question?
I did.
Yeah.
If you had to go through the process of graduating, getting a job, is there anything you would do differently or tell yourself looking back?
Yeah, so the question is, would I do anything differently if I were just graduating now and with the experience that I've had now? Is that correct? Yeah. So I would say the one thing I didn't think too much about was I was focused on the finance and accounting part of the job. And I didn't put enough thought into what kind of industry I wanted to get into, because trying to figure out what you're supporting in finance and accounting is just as important almost. And I didn't even think about, I got into Land O'Lakes, which is farming, and I grew up in the suburbs of Minnesota and knew nothing about farming. And then now in IT healthcare, and I know nothing about computers, infrastructure, and healthcare. And it's been awesome because I learn a lot, but just being in an industry that you feel passionate about can go a long way.
I would say for me, the thing that I didn't do a good job of that I would, if I could go back and do it differently, I would, is exactly what I said before, is finding somebody right away that, you know, could be a mentor. I really didn't find that until years later. So when I was the first year audit associate, I was kind of just flying solo a little bit and didn't have a lot of support as far as I couldn't ask questions candidly of somebody who had been there for a while. I just kind of felt like I had to keep to myself and do my own thing. And I think that hurt me ultimately in that role. And so looking back, I wish I would have taken more initiative to do that fresh out of school and in my first job. So that would be my advice, is don't wait, because I waited, and I think it would have been beneficial to have done that right out of the gate.
I think we have time for maybe one more question, possibly two.
I've got a question for Caleb. You mentioned that you're supervising, now, and so how did that transition come about for you, and how has that been, as far as being a manager of people now and not just doing finance and accounting?
Sure. Yeah, so the question was the transition into supervising people. So really the first opportunity I had to supervise people was at Target. So I was kind of the audit lead for certain audits. So I'd have, a couple of associates working with me, not a direct reporting relationship, but overseeing and reviewing work. But really the transition to direct reports came when I actually came to Republic. And it certainly was an adjustment, to go from just being somebody who's managed by somebody else to suddenly now you're responsible for others. And I'd say it was difficult at first. My first direct report was like 25 years older than me. And that dynamic is very strange. They're like, who's this punk kid coming in trying to tell me what to do? They don't know anything. So it's different. I think the thing you have to do is remember that people are people, right? You have to keep in mind that people have feelings, and you just have to respect and be humble when you're leading, and not try and, this is what I say, so you have to do it, but just try and find an approach that works. And everybody's a little different. And that's what I found out, is the way you manage one person is not going to be the same way you manage somebody else. And so that's something that I found out pretty quick, is that your approach has to be different, and you have to remember they have feelings, they have hopes and desires and things that you have to keep in mind. Real quick, I actually hired a Northwestern alum who was here at Northwestern the same time I was. I hired him as an accountant when I was assistant controller, and kind of worked with him, developed him, and he's now my assistant controller, so reports to me in his role. So it's been kind of fun. We both moved up together, and so I really, just thought it was cool that, two Northwestern alums kind of moving up together and working together. So that's kind of been a fun thing. So I always like to look for those Northwestern alums as the resumes come in. So, I'm always happy to talk to any of you that might have questions as well. So find me after if you're interested.
Can we give them a round of applause?